In Chapter 3, we are going to look at attitudes and job satisfaction. Attitudes are evaluative statements or judgments concerning objects, people, or events. They reflect how we feel about something. In other words, saying, "I like my job," reflects your attitude toward work. There are three components of an attitude: the cognitive component, the affective component, and the behavior component. The cognitive component is a description of or a belief in the way things are. For example, a statement such as "my pay is low" reflects the cognitive component of an attitude. The affective component reflects the emotion or feeling. This is a more critical part of an attitude. An example of the affective component is "I am angry over how little I am paid." Finally, the behavior component describes the intention to behave a certain way towards someone or something. An example of this would be saying or thinking, "I'm going to look for another job that pays better." This slide includes another example that contrasts the three components of an attitude. As stated before, the three components are cognitive, affective, and behavioral. And in this example, we see that the cognitive component says, "My supervisor gave a promotion to a coworker who deserved it less than I did. My supervisor is unfair." This shows the evaluation that occurs in the cognitive component. The affective component, which reflects the feeling, says, "I dislike my supervisor." And finally, the behavioral component, which reflects the action that one will take, states, "I'm looking for other work. I've complained about my supervisor to anyone who would listen." These three components work together to aid in our understanding of the complexity of an attitude. From this example, we can see that it results in a negative attitude toward a supervisor. Attitude theory suggests that your ultimate behavior in a situation is a function of all three components. Here we have an example for a cell phone. How would you react if someone was talking on their cell phone in a restaurant? You are unlikely to say anything to someone using a cell phone in a restaurant if you are not irritated by this behavior, which is the affective component, if you believe cell phone use helps people manage their lives, which reflects the cognitive component, and if you have no intention of confronting this individual, which reflects the behavioral component. Early research assumed that attitudes were causally related to behavior. One researcher, Leon Festinger, argued that attitudes follow behavior. Sometimes we observe people who will change what they say so it doesn't contradict their behavior. When attitudes and behaviors don't line up, individuals will experience what is known as cognitive dissonance. This incongruity is uncomfortable, and individuals will seek to reduce the dissonance to find consistency. People are willing to live with some discomfort, but the degree to which this is true depends on the importance of the elements, how much influence the individual has on the situation, and the rewards available. Most of the research in organizational behavior has been concerned with three major job attitudes: job satisfaction, job involvement, and organizational commitment. In addition, perceived organizational support and employee engagement are important. Job satisfaction is the positive feeling about the job resulting from an evaluation of its characteristics. Job involvement looks at the degree of psychological identification with the job. This is high when an employee strongly identifies with and really cares about the kind of work that they do. Related to this is psychological empowerment, which is defined as employees' beliefs in the degree to which they can influence their work environment, their competencies, the meaningfulness of the job, and their perceived autonomy. Another important job attitude is organizational commitment, which is defined as the act of identifying with a particular organization and its goals and wishing to remain a member of the organization. It is the emotional attachment to an organization and a belief in its values. Employees who are committed will be less likely to engage in work withdrawal even if they are dissatisfied because they have a sense of organizational loyalty. Perceived organizational support is the degree to which employees believe the organization values their contribution and cares about their well-being. The perception of fairness is a key factor in determining the willingness of employees to work hard for the organization. In addition, employees have a higher perceived organizational support when they perceive that they have some input in the decision-making process. Perceived organizational support is important in countries where power distance, which is the degree to which people in a country accept that power in institutions and organizations is distributed unequally, is lower. On this slide, let's explore power distance a little further. As noted on the previous slide, power distance is the degree to which people in a country accept that power in institutions and organizations is distributed unequally. Low power distant countries are where people are more likely to view work as an exchange rather than as a moral obligation. In these low power distant countries, employees look for reasons to feel supported by their organization. The United States is an example of a low power distant country. China is an example of a high power distant country. In countries such as China, employees' perceived organizational support perceptions are not as deeply based on demonstrations and fairness, support, and encouragement. Employee engagement goes beyond just job satisfaction. It also includes involvement and enthusiasm for the job. Highly engaged employees have a passion for their work and feel a deep connection to their company. Disengaged employees have essentially checked out, putting time but not energy or attention into their work. Engagement is a real concern for most organizations because surveys indicate that few, between 17 and 29%, are highly engaged by their work. Engagement is a very general concept, perhaps broad enough to capture the intersection of the other variables we've discussed. In other words, it may be what these attitudes have in common. There is a high degree of overlap between the different job attitudes. For example, if a worker has higher job satisfaction, he or she tends to be more engaged and show a stronger commitment to the organization. Researchers are trying to find ways to measure the different attitudes in order to get at their distinctiveness. As we have discussed, job satisfaction is defined as a positive feeling about a job resulting from an evaluation of its characteristics. There are multiple ways to measure job satisfaction, but two approaches are popular. The single global rating approach is a response to one question, such as, all things considered, how satisfied are you with your job? Respondents circle a number between 1 and 5 on a scale from highly satisfied to highly dissatisfied. The second approach, the summation of job facets, is more sophisticated. It identifies key elements in a job, such as the nature of the work, supervision, present pay, promotion opportunities, and relations with coworkers. It helps managers zero in on problems and deal with them faster and more accurately than the single global rating method. Research shows that over the past 30 years, the majority of U.S. workers have been satisfied with their jobs. However, the recent economic downturn has generated a dramatic drop-off in satisfaction levels, with just half of workers reporting feeling satisfied now. The exhibits in the book and on the following slides illustrate additional details regarding differences among job satisfaction, including the effect of particular facets and cultural contexts. As shown here in Exhibit 3-3, people have typically been more satisfied with their jobs overall, with the work itself, and with their supervisors and coworkers than they have been with their pay and promotion opportunities. Exhibit 3-4 provides results by a global study of job satisfaction levels of workers in 15 countries. Mexico and Switzerland report the highest levels of job satisfaction. Does the score that the United States received surprise you? Take a few minutes and think about that, as well as why our score may be what it is. Interesting jobs that provide training, variety, independence, and control satisfy most employees. There is also a strong correspondence between how well people enjoy the social context of their workplace and how satisfied they are overall. Interdependence, feedback, social support, and interaction with coworkers outside the workplace are strongly related to job satisfaction, even after accounting for characteristics of the work itself. Personality also plays a role in job satisfaction. Research has shown that people who have positive core self-evaluations, who believe in their inner worth and basic competence, are more satisfied with their jobs than those who have negative core self-evaluations. Pay has also had an influence on job satisfaction, but not as much as one may think. We'll look at this fact in the next slide. Exhibit 3-5 shows the relationship between the average pay for a job and the average level of job satisfaction. Once an individual reaches a level of comfortable living, which in the United States occurs at about $40,000 a year, depending on the region and family size, the relationship between pay and job satisfaction virtually disappears. Money does motivate people, as we will discover in Chapter 6, but what motivates us is not necessarily the same as what makes us happy. An organization's commitment to corporate social responsibility, also known as CSR, or its self-regulated actions to benefit society or the environment beyond what is required by the law, increasingly affects employee job satisfaction. Organizations practice CSR in a number of ways, including environmental sustainability initiatives, nonprofit work, and charitable giving. The relationship between CSR and job satisfaction is particularly strong for millennials. Although the link between CSR and job satisfaction is strengthening, not all employees find value in it. Therefore, organizations need to address a few issues in order to be most effective. The first is that not all projects are equally meaningful for every person's job satisfaction, yet participation for all employees is sometimes expected. Secondly, some organizations require employees to contribute in a prescribed manner. Third, CSR measures can seem disconnected from the employee's actual work, providing no increase to job satisfaction at all. It's also important to look at the triple bottom line. This includes looking out for and caring about doing the best possible for both the people, which are the employees and the stakeholders in the community, the planet, which involves the environment, and then also making a profit. This slide summarizes what I discussed on the last slide, where I talked about how the organization needs to address a few issues in order to be more effective in carrying out CSR policies and initiatives. So please take a minute to review these again. Now, let's look at specific outcomes of job satisfaction related to job performance, organizational citizenship behavior, customer satisfaction, and life satisfaction. In regard to job performance, happy workers are more likely to be productive workers. The evidence suggests that productivity is likely to lead to satisfaction. When it comes to organizational citizenship behaviors, it seems logical to assume job satisfaction should be a major determinant of an employee's organizational citizenship behavior. Finally, research shows that when people are more satisfied with their jobs, they are more likely to engage in these organizational citizenship behaviors. Evidence indicates that satisfied employees increase customer satisfaction and loyalty. And finally, research in Europe indicated that job satisfaction is positively correlated with life satisfaction, and your attitudes and experiences in life spill over into your job approaches and experiences. Furthermore, life satisfaction decreases when people become unemployed. What happens when employees dislike their jobs? The Exit Voice Loyalty Neglect Framework, which is shown in Exhibit 3-6 in the book and on the next slide, is helpful for understanding the consequences of dissatisfaction. The responses include the exit response, which directs behavior toward leaving the organization, including looking for a new position or resigning. The voice response includes actively and constructively attempting to improve conditions, including suggesting improvements, discussing problems with superiors, and undertaking union activity. The loyalty response means passively but optimistically waiting for conditions to improve, including speaking up for the organization in the face of external criticism and trusting the organization and its management to do the right thing. Finally, the neglect response passively allows conditions to worsen and includes chronic absenteeism or lateness, reduced efforts, and increased error rate. Here's Exhibit 3-6, which I mentioned on the last slide. It summarizes these responses to dissatisfaction, and it demonstrates how these responses differ along two dimensions, which is constructive and destructive, and active and passive. For example, you can see that the voice response is seen as a constructive method as well as an active method, while neglect is seen as a destructive method and a very passive method. In addition, we can look at job dissatisfaction by exploring counterproductive work behavior. Substance abuse, stealing at work, undue socialization, gossiping, absenteeism, and tardiness are examples of behaviors that are destructive to organizations. They are indicators of a broader syndrome called counterproductive work behaviors, also known as CWB. They are also termed deviant behavior in the workplace or simply employee withdrawal. CWB doesn't just happen. The behaviors often follow negative and sometimes long-standing attitudes. Generally, job dissatisfaction predicts these behaviors. People who are not satisfied with their work become frustrated, which lowers their performance and makes them more likely to commit CWB. Other research suggests that in addition to vocational misfit, which is being in the wrong line of work, lack of fit with the organization, which is working in the wrong kind of organizational culture, also predicts these types of behaviors. As a manager, you can take steps to mitigate these behaviors. You can poll employee attitudes, for instance, and identify areas for organizational improvement. If there is no vocational fit, the employee will not be fulfilled, so you can screen for that. Tailoring tasks so a person's abilities and values can be exercised should increase job satisfaction and reduce these behaviors. Furthermore, creating strong teams, integrating supervisors with them, providing formalized team policies, and introducing team-based incentives may also help lower the counter-work productive contagion that lowers the standards of the group. Examples of counterproductive work behaviors include theft, gossiping, backstabbing, drug and alcohol abuse, destroying organizational property, violence, purposefully doing bad or incorrect work, surfing the net for personal use, excessive socializing, tardiness, sabotage, and sexual harassment. We find a consistent relationship between satisfaction and absenteeism. The more satisfied you are, the less likely you are to miss work. Satisfaction is also negatively related to turnover, but the correlation is stronger than what we found for absenteeism. Job satisfaction predicts unionization, stealing, undue socializing, and tardiness. If employees don't like their work environment, they will respond to it somehow, and one of these ways would be through workplace deviance. Often, managers just don't get it. It should come as no surprise that job satisfaction can affect the bottom line. Regular surveys can reduce gaps between what managers think employees feel and what they really feel. On these last two slides, we're going to look at implications for managers. Creating a satisfied workplace is not a guarantee of successful performance, but managers should make it a priority as much as possible. In particular, managers should look at the following. Of the major job attitudes: job satisfaction, job involvement, organizational commitment, perceived organizational support, and employee engagement, remember that an employee's job satisfaction level is the best single predictor of behavior. Managers also need to pay attention to employees' job satisfaction levels as determinants of their performance, turnover, absenteeism, and withdrawal behaviors. Additionally, managers need to measure employee job attitudes objectively and at regular intervals in order to determine how employees are reacting to their work. They need to evaluate the fit between the employee's work interests and the intrinsic parts of his or her job to create work that is challenging and interesting to the individual. Finally, they must consider the fact that high pay alone is unlikely to create a satisfying work environment. This concludes chapter 3. Please let me know if you have any questions.